Hi everyone, welcome to this video on B3 diseases. So I'm going to talk about communicable and non-communicable diseases and then go through a few examples that you need to know and also the differences between bacteria and viral diseases. Okay, so let's start with communicable diseases. So communicable means anything that can be spread from person to person. So a disease such as the flu can be spread from person to person. So e.g. flu. So flu, common cold, anything like that that can be passed on is communicable. Non-communicable, therefore, means that it's a disease that can't be passed on from person to person. So, for example, something like cancer, heart disease, you can't just catch cancer by touching somebody with it. So not spread from person to person. Cancer or heart disease. Okay, so the main ways that pathogens are spread from person to person. Pathogen meaning anything that causes disease or anything that causes infection. So it bacteria and viruses, they both come under the term pathogen. So anything that causes disease. So the three main ways that pathogens can be spread is water, so drinking dirty water, there might be pathogens surviving in that water such as cholera, and drinking that contaminated water can lead to certain symptoms. So that's one. Water, air, so pathogens can be spread, they can be breathed in, they can be transferred when somebody coughs or sneezes. That's why you should always use a tissue and then bin that tissue after you've sneezed or you've wiped your nose. And then the third one is via direct contact. So direct contact is actually, touching that contaminated surface or touching the skin that's contaminated. An example is athlete's foot. So athlete's foot is a fungus and it makes the skin itchy and flaky. It's a fungal disease and it can be passed on from person to person through, using the same shower floor or using the same towel, and that's somebody with athlete's foot has used. Okay, so how diseases can be reduced or prevented then? So first thing is by being hygienic. So being hygienic means, washing your hands with soap thoroughly. If you've sneezed, you used a tissue and you've thrown it away. The second thing is by destroying vectors. Now, vectors are anything that carries disease. So anything that carries disease but is not infected themselves, So an example of that is a mosquito. So a mosquito is a vector and it carries malaria. The mosquito isn't infected with malaria, it hasn't got the symptoms of malaria, it's just the carrier, and that malaria is then passed on to animals and passed on to humans, and the mosquito is the vector. So if we destroy the mosquito using sprays, bug sprays, or keep them away using mosquito nets, then that works towards destroying vectors. The next thing is isolating individuals. So, for example, if somebody had Ebola, what we would have to do is quarantine them, isolate them, not come into contact with them so that that disease cannot be spread any further. And then the last one is being vaccinated. So a vaccination, and I'll talk through what a vaccination is a bit more later, but vaccinating people just helps a large population to become immune to a certain disease, such as measles. A lot of children have the MMR vaccine, which helps them not catch measles, mumps and rubella. So those are your prevention methods. Let's go through specific diseases then. So the first one, oh actually before I do that, let's go through the difference between bacteria and viruses. I think that'll be useful before I go through examples. So bacteria and viruses. So bacteria are larger in size than viruses. So they're still tiny, you know, in comparison to a normal cell, but they're larger than viruses. So if you're not sure what the organelles of bacteria are, make sure you go and check out my other video when I was talking about animal cells, plant cells, bacteria cell organelles in the topic B1. So bacteria then, what they do is they get inside the body and they can release toxins. And it's these toxins that can make us feel ill. They also replicate rapidly. So bacteria, them reproducing or replicating rapidly means they can do more damage and make us feel ill. Antibiotics do work against bacteria. So if you go to the doctor and you've got a bacterial infection, the doctor will give you antibiotics and that will clear up the bacteria. Viruses, on the other hand, are smaller than bacteria. So they don't release toxins, but what they do is they get inside our healthy cells and use our cells as a host. So use our cells as a host. So if this is my healthy cell, this is the virus, they get inside our healthy cells and they start replicating rapidly. And then eventually our healthy cell will burst, and it's this cell damage that makes us feel ill. So using our cells as a host basically means they're living there, they're feeding off our cells, they're kind of using it as a home. So I would say rapidly replicate inside our healthy cells. Cell eventually bursts. Cell damage equals feeling ill. So antibiotics do not work against viruses, and the reason for this is because we would have to kill our own healthy cells in order to kill the viruses, and antibiotics do not kill our healthy cells and cannot kill our healthy cells in order to get to the viruses. If you've got a viral infection, you have to just let your own white blood cells and your own immune system fight off the infection, as opposed to taking this kind of medication, because it will not work. So just make sure you know the differences about how they infect the body. It's really, really important. It could be a 4-marker, it could be a 6-mark question. So just be quite familiar with that. So let's actually go on to the examples now then. So the first one is a bacterial infection. So I'll do the bacterial infections first. So 1, salmonella. So salmonella, you might have heard of that, food poisoning basically, and it's a bacterial infection. So you need to know the symptoms and how to reduce the spread of it. So symptoms then. So you'll just have to memorise these, I'm afraid. I think there's about 6 to learn, but I'll go through all of them. You've just got to memorise the symptoms and how to reduce the spread. So food poisoning then, so fever, stomach cramps, diarrhea, vomiting, all of those are symptoms of you getting salmonella. Because it's a bacterial infection, you can use antibiotics to kill the bacterial infection. So in order to prevent you getting salmonella in the first place, what you should always do is wash your hands after after touching meat. So if you're in the kitchen and you're handling raw meat, you need to wash your hands. Wash your hands after handling raw meat. Wash your hands thoroughly. Make sure there's no cross-contamination, so don't use the same knives that you've just used on raw meat to then chop vegetables. And also, most poultry are given a vaccination against salmonella to control the spread of disease. So this is, when the animals are alive. These animals are given vaccinations to stop the spread of disease amongst themselves. So therefore, when you cook it, when you buy it from the shops, it shouldn't have bacteria on it. Okay, so that's one, salmonella. The second one is bacterial infection, is gonorrhea. So this is an STD. So 2, gonorrhea. So I'll just put STD, bacterial infection. So the symptoms here then, the symptoms are pain when you urinate, thick yellow or green discharge, from genitals. And how you can get rid of this infection is antibiotics again, because it's a bacterial infection, so you'll have to see your doctor and the doctor will prescribe antibiotics. But how you can prevent it is by using barrier methods of contraception, so using things like condoms to actually stop the STD from spreading from person to person. So condoms or any barrier methods really. Okay, so that's the second bacterial infection that you need to know. Let's go on to viruses. So, viral infection. So remember, viruses are the ones that get inside our healthy cells and use them as a host and replicate rapidly and cause cell damage. So the first one then for viral infections is measles. So measles, these are spread via droplets, so spread via droplets of sneezing or coughing. So measles can be easily spread around schools and nurseries, particularly with young children, because their hygiene isn't up to scratch. Because they're young, they might be sneezing, they might be coughing, they might not be wiping their nose using a tissue, they might not throw the tissue away when they should. So, and then other children in nursery, they breathe in these droplets and then they can catch measles. So the symptoms here to look out for with measles is getting a red skin rash, fever, and this is quite an extreme infection. So red skin rash, fever, but it can also lead to pneumonia. So you would end up in hospital with pneumonia. So it is, quite a harsh one. And lots of people are therefore vaccinated. So to prevent you catching measles, the MMR vaccine is given.